I think we have a good one today. One of the great things I get to do is I get to walk around campus and talk to a lot of students, and I was really impressed there for a little bit because, I walked around and I asked a couple of students if they knew anything about Morocco, and of course I had a couple of them that went like this, close but not quite. But a couple of them knew about Morocco, and I was really impressed. And then they said, well, I had Professor Lee last semester, and he made us learn all about it. Okay, all right, I understand. I guess there's a benefit to what you can do to your students. Well, as you know, our topic today is Morocco. It's a country about the size of California, located between Algeria and Western Sahara. It's got an interesting history, which I'm assuming Dedric will take us through a little bit here.
Actually, no.
Not as much history? Okay, well then I've got a little history here. How's that?
Okay.
I'll give it, because I know everybody remembers that lecture they had way back in history class about that. But, most of Morocco's history dates back to around, what would be the 7th century, when they had the Arab conquest of North Africa. And that went on for a number of years until about 1860, when Spain raided North Africa and took over the territory and began the development of what we now know as the northern provinces in that area. There's been an independence struggle for hundreds of years in North Africa, and what has emerged out of that is primarily a modern phenomenon. Morocco has now annexed part of Western Sahara and taken over a great deal of that, and now still lives under a monarchy. Their constitution provides for a strong monarchy, but they have a weak parliament and judicial branch. The country has made improvements in human rights under King Mohammed VI, and its press is moderately free. Since early in his reign, King Mohammed has called for expanded employment opportunities, economic development, meaningful education, and increased housing availability. The government has been pursuing an ambitious program of modernization and revitalization of its country's infrastructure, such as roads, trains, communications, and water. Most people do know Morocco by some of its cities, including, of course, Casablanca, Marrakesh, and Tangier. Well, our presenter today has been there. He's going to give us some insight into the daily life of Morocco. Our presenter today is Mr. Dedric Lee. He has a Master of Arts in Political Science and a Master of Arts in History from Arkansas State University. You might hear a little of that in his voice, I don't know. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Political Science from the University of Southern Mississippi, and an Associate of Arts degree from Paralegal Technology, from Jones County Junior College. Prior to joining the Jefferson College faculty, Mr. Lee taught classes at Arkansas State University, and he's been here 4 years. He got his first taste of international travel in May by visiting Morocco with 15 Missouri Community College professors. Throughout his journey, he experienced life in Morocco and learned many interesting facts, he says, about himself as well. Yes. His presentation will discuss many topics, including Moroccan politics, daily life in the kingdom, and a few of the changes in the social life instituted by King Mohammed VI. So, without any further ado, will you please welcome Dedric Lee.
Thank you. Dr. Comiskey, thank you for those kind words. And I would also like to thank, before I get started here, Carolyn Elphinstone, my division chair. She gave me the support and the encouragement needed to go to the country. And then also someone who's not here today, Lisa Hollander. Lisa Hollander wrote the grant, the Title 6A grant, that enabled me to go to Morocco. And so I'm truly grateful for the efforts that these folks put in for me. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, as you can probably figure, I am from the South. Born and raised in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And so one thing about me is that I love cats. I have 3 cats at home, and I believe they are the most wonderful creatures on earth. And so I realize I just made some enemies there. But I truly do enjoy cats, and I'll get to the cats in just a minute. But the summer of 2009 was a wonderful time period in my life. I was able to do a lot of traveling. I got to go to Daytona Beach, Florida, but not for the beach. I did AP grading for educational testing services, so not exactly a whole lot of fun. And I got to go to many other places, but the place that stands out the most for me and in my life so far has been Morocco. I learned a lot about myself. One thing, I do not like group tours. Come to find out, I just did not like waiting on other people. And so, one of those things, you just learn about your own personality. So, as I went through Morocco, we went all throughout the country. We just didn't stay in Casablanca or Rabat or Fez. We went all throughout the country and experienced many different parts of it. Okay, so first, I want to talk about the purpose of the trip. Part of the purpose of the trip was to encourage students to learn about Africa, but also learn about international events, and for students to take an interest in it, because as we all know, international politics and international business are a growing part of our young folks' life in society today. So my goal was to encourage students to learn, and that's what I hope to do in my classroom with my students, in my international relations class, my current political issues class, to spur that motivation to learn about the world outside of the United States. And so as part of it, we were very fortunate being part of the Missouri Community College Association to get this Title 6A grant. And then last but certainly not least, to have fun and learn some stuff myself. Okay, now getting to Morocco was quite an adventure. We went from St. Louis to New York, and while we were in New York, we had an 8-hour layover. When you have that long a layover, you go, what am I going to do? So I had these grand visions of getting on the subway and seeing New York. Little did I know that was not going to occur when I landed at JFK. I needed all 8 of those hours to get on board that plane. Now, one thing that I learned that came to be very important while I was in Morocco was we call it a lesson about Moroccan time. Their culture is not as dominated and oriented by the clock as we are. And so that was something that would be that was a good lesson to learn, but it could also be frustrating for us. Because when we say, I'll be there at 9 o'clock, we mean we'll be there at 9 o'clock, not 9:30, 10 o'clock. And so that became a very difficult thing for me to adjust to, but I eventually did. But my first experience was the check-in gate for Royal Air Morocco. We had an 8:45 flight, and I showed up at 6 o'clock thinking I would check in my luggage and everything would be fine. And later come to find out there wouldn't be anybody at the counter until about 7:15. And then I had to get through security. So that was quite an adjustment, but one that was an important lesson. Now, as we got to Morocco, one of the things that really struck me at first was the swine flu check. We land in the airport, and there are these guys, about 8 of them, lined up, all of them with white coats and little thermometers. And as you walk up to them, they come up to you and they stick that thermometer on your forehead, and you're just kind of looking like, oh no, what's going on? What have I done? And then something beeped, and he motioned for me to go on through. Well, it took me a minute to remember that while I was over there, or before we left, New York had had some swine flu cases, and some schools had to be shut down to be cleaned up. So we had that. Now, an interesting thing was that it was easy to check in with the officials. Surprisingly, Americans were treated quite well. We didn't even have to have our bags checked when we came into the country. They motioned us through one door, we opened it up, and we were outside. And so we were very lucky and treated very well. Okay, so there was no time to worry about jet lag because our tour operators had us hit the ground running. As soon as we loaded up our vans, we went to the second largest mosque in the world, King Hassan II Mosque. Okay? Now, this is an incredible facility because it's probably about the size of the Scott Trade Center. And it holds probably about 20,000 people. And so it's on the beach and it's a beautiful place. And so there were tours that people could take. Now, Did I take the tour? No, I did not, because my luggage had my traveler's checks. And my traveler's checks and my luggage were in the van stowed away. So I didn't have very much money at the time. So I decided just to hang around and walk around the area. Well, I stopped at a cafe to get some caffeine in my system after a nice long 9-hour flight. I went there and I sat down and I started noticing lots of cats in the area. And so I was excited to see all those cats and play with them, and because it reminded me so much of home. Well, come to find out that cats have a special place in the culture of Morocco, because cats are seen as clean animals because they bathe themselves. And so whereas dogs are seen in a much more utilitarian fashion, cats have a little bit more special place with them because of that reason. So that was certainly an interesting note for me, and something that gave me an extra bond to the Moroccan people. Okay? So after we left Casablanca, we went to the capital city of Rabat. And so while we were there, we got to witness the changing of the guards at the king's palace. And so that was a great time to kind of see Moroccan majesty at work. And that was a good experience. So we finally got to go to the hotel after 48 hours and get a bed and a bath. And so that was a wonderful part. Now, the next day we go to a place called Volubilis. Okay? And this was a Roman outpost in the 3rd century. A western outpost for the Roman Empire. Okay? And so what it was that today Volubilis is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And so what struck me about this site was the beauty of the mosaic tile floors. That was something that was incredible, to be somewhere at the time when these were built, to where seeing or just imagining craftsmen trying to line up 1 square inch tiles and making these beautiful designs. So it gave me a lot of appreciation for the culture. And so just seeing those beautiful mosaic tiles was the highlight of that trip. And what was interesting was, even after the Romans left there, the place was still inhabited until the 1700s, when the Great Lisbon earthquake, folks had to abandon the site. Now, moving on here, after we left Volubilis, we were on our way to the desert, and we stopped at a town called Ifrane. Now, what was neat about it was that it's referred to as a little piece of Switzerland in Morocco, the last thing you think of. But what was great about it was the design of the buildings. All looked like chalets. And so it was just neat to see that in Morocco on your way to the desert. And so this town has another bit of affection for me personally, because it was the first place I was able to actually cash traveler's checks. Keep in mind that I'd been in the country 4 days. So I owed a lot of my colleagues some money by that point. So they were ready for me to cash them as well. But we stopped in this town on our way to visit the macaque monkeys. I hope I said that right. A lot of times they're referred to as the Barbary apes of the cedar forest. And there's a picture of me feeding one of the monkeys. They were very personable to people. They were used to them, and but the one thing that was fun was we got to feed them, but the other sad part was that we were encouraging them to get used to human beings and not, keep their instincts. But we were also told that by us feeding them, that keeps them from going into the cedar forest and tearing down their habitat. So, it was, in one way it was kind of tough, but in another way you knew you were helping out in some small way. But that was by far another highlight of the trip, getting to feed those monkeys there. And it was really a fun experience to just see how easily they could reach in and pull something out of your hand. Quite a time. Now, the next part of the trip, we went to the desert. Some of my colleagues decided to engage in a camel trek and spend the night in a tent. Now, at the time, I did not feel like doing that, which turned out to be a big mistake. I should have. And here's why. I thought I would be more relaxed by having a hotel room. So I got a hotel room at a very nice resort. But the problem was I didn't have air conditioning. And so I had to open up a window. And when I went to bed that night, the wind picked up. And throughout the night, my roommate, who was with me at the time, noticed I started making an awful noise in my sleep. Well, come to find out, the wind had shifted and sand was blowing into our room, and I was right by the window. And so it was quite a time. And when we woke up the next morning, we truly saw the power of the sand, because the floor in our hotel room was covered with sand. And my first thought was, those poor folks who own this hotel, imagine trying to sweep out our room after we got through it. And so that was something that, a humorous note there, but the tent would have definitely been a much better option. But I decided that I should stay in there, and I paid the price. Okay, but what was amazing was being able to get up in the morning and see the sun rise, and just to be able to see it rise over those big dunes was something quite amazing to see. Now, the next day was probably the low light of the trip, and we refer to this as the infamous 2-hour drive. And what I mean by this was the folks who were driving our vans got us lost. And so we were lost and trying to get to the Todra Gorge. And the problem with that was nobody knew exactly where we were going. Luckily, the biologist of the trip picked up a map and started going, we're not in the right place where we should be. And so finally, after some discussion and hurt feelings and everything else, we realized we truly were lost and we were heading in the wrong direction. About 2 hours in the wrong direction. And so but when we got to the Todra Gorge, it certainly made it worthwhile once we got there. Now, another highlight of the trip was the market of Marrakesh. This was something like I had never seen before in my life. The energy that came out of this place was incredible. And this is a view from up above. And some interesting things you can see maybe is there are some satellite dishes. There are satellite dishes all over the country for television, because it's kind of, as we would call it, bundled. They pay their power bill, and that also includes the satellite TV. And so lots of places had satellite TV. And the market at Marrakesh was an amazing place because it had many, many different items. And at the time, the European Soccer League championships were occurring with Barcelona and Manchester United. And every shop had soccer jerseys for sale. And so I felt out of place by not buying one. But there were lots of things there. Now, an interesting thing, while we were there, we witnessed a fight. 2 motor scooters collided while they were riding through the market. And so quickly, a group of people surrounded the 2 instigators. And within about 30 seconds, a van pulled up with gentlemen in brown outfits and guns. And needless to say, that fight broke up very quickly and things cleared out just as fast. And so that was our first time to witness a Moroccan brawl. All right, now, Moroccan politics, okay? This is certainly an interesting part of American history. Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States after we got after the Declaration of Independence. And so King Mohammed VI, he is the political, social, and economic leader of the country. He's held with a lot of reverence within the country. Many people have a picture of him in their homes or their business. And if by chance the king or a previous king had come to visit their business or their home, that picture was put in kind of a center area of the home to show that off. So there was a lot of reverence for the king. And what's interesting was that the United States and Morocco have a bond. Morocco had a terrorist attack after 9/11. Okay, I believe it was 2003. So we have that bond that goes along with that, along with our historical ties. Now, an interesting thing Dr. Comiskey mentioned was the freedom of the press. The press has opened up quite a bit in Morocco, but there's still one area that the media is not allowed to tread on, and that is when you talk about the king. There was a public opinion poll held in some Moroccan newspapers, and the king had a 91% approval rate. Now, you would think that would be good. They would be happy. No, the king is not subject to public opinion polls. And so a lot of those newspapers were threatened and even considered being shut down because they ran those public opinion polls. And so, the king was that one area that was still very sensitive not to discuss. And so a lot of other areas can be talked about, which is good for the free press, but just that one area of the king is still a sore spot. Now, some other things. The reforms, okay? King Muhammad has realized that he's in a unique position in the world. He's close to Europe, but his people are Arabic. And so he wants to maintain those cultural ties, but he also has to realize that Europe is so close by, and he needs the trade and the Europeans to help him out. So he's in a tough position. One thing that was mentioned before was the low-income housing. That's been one thing that King Muhammad has really tried to stress, is to build people homes where they actually, where they have a home, which is one of his goals, to build folks homes. Also, women's rights. This has been an area of a lot of changes. One thing in Morocco, it's harder to get a divorce now. And women are now being able to get assets out of the marriage and also have more rights as far as custody of children. So it's a slow-moving process, but one that is changing. And so more jobs are opening up to women, but the king wants to do it in a much more slower way, where to give time for people to adjust to it. And so that was certainly something important, okay? And so King Muhammad has tried to balance that, the cultural needs, with the economic and the social as well. Now, life in Morocco, one thing that truly surprised me were the meals. They weren't that different than what we have here. Typically, we would have like a meat, a starch, and some sort of vegetable. Typically, they had beef, chicken, lamb. The only thing they didn't have was pork, but that was for religious reasons. And so starches were couscous and rice and vegetables. You had a lot of beans over there, and also a lot of carrots. And so the diet wasn't that hard to get used to. The spices were a little bit different, but it wasn't that difficult to get used to the meals, okay? Then also, some of the things that were neat were the bottled drinks. Bottled water was cheap and plentiful over there, okay? Most times I spent about 30 or 40 cents to get a bottle of water. And so that was a great thing to do. Now, one area that was kind of difficult to see was dealing with handicapped citizens. Many of the handicapped over there are in a difficult position because there's no social or government support system for them. They either have to depend on their families or basically make their living on their own. And a lot of them, unfortunately, have to resort to begging. So that was one of the sad parts of the trip, with the plight of the handicapped over there. Now, just in case you were wondering, in Morocco, going to the bathroom, okay? A lot of places had both Turkish-style bathrooms and Western-style toilets. And so, as you can see here, this was kind of the Turkish-style version of it, where, you poured a bucket of water down the drain. And so most of the time in situations like this, the guys would go into this type of bathroom, and we would leave the Western style for the ladies on the trip, okay? And something interesting about over there were attendants at most of the bathrooms. And so the attendants, they kept them very clean. The bathrooms were very clean, which was wonderful. And the thing that I liked about it was if you went into a store, sometimes you feel like you have to buy something. If you go into a store and use their restroom. Well, over there, you can just give the attendant a tip, and it was a very small tip. And so that was a lot easier to do, being able to give that tip there instead of feeling like you had to buy something. Now, another thing was driving in Morocco. Traffic was quite the adventure in this part. And so here's what the U.S. State Department said about driving in Morocco. Traffic accidents are a significant hazard in Morocco. Driving practices are very poor and have resulted in serious injuries to U.S. citizens and fatalities to U.S. citizens. congested streets are characteristics of urban driving. Now, the three things you need in Morocco when you are looking for a car are good horn, good brakes, and good luck. If a car has that, you're in good shape. And so we went 11 days without seeing a wreck. And by far, the one thing that scared me the most were the scooters as they would weave in and out of traffic. So, clothing was a mixture of traditional Arabic and Western clothing. A lot of the younger folks wore more Western style clothing. But it was a mixture of people. Now, that picture right there is a street level view of the Marrakesh market. Now, this last photo here was of us on our way from Marrakesh to the airport in Casablanca. We stopped at a place called Afrique, and it was basically the Moroccan version of Stuckey's. And so we went there, and that was part of our last stop on the trip. Now, as I conclude today, I'm going to give Dr. Comiskey some evidence to hold against me in the future with this last photo. And I waited to hold it until the very end, until I knew you would have time to digest your food. So I'm just warning you now, Dr. Comiskey, here's some good evidence for you. What was he thinking? No trip to the Arab world would be complete without some belly dancing lessons. So Dr. Comiskey, here you go, sir. And so that was a picture of me trying to attempt to belly dance, much to the amusement of the people in the restaurant at the time. And so that concludes my presentation today. Dr. Comiskey, I guess I'll...
Do you have any questions real fast?
Yes, sir. Oh.
The dress I see is both Arabic as well as Western.
Yes, sir.
That portrait of the king that would appear in all the houses.
Yes, sir.
When we saw him, he was in the Oval Office, obviously, in Western attire. Was he in Arabic?
You could see him actually in both. Some would actually have him in like a suit, but then other times you would see him in the more traditional Moroccan style dress, which is a little bit different than Arab dress. And so it just depended on each one, but they were available. There were pictures of him in both. Yes, sir.
You mentioned earlier that Morocco had annexed part of Western Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering why. What is their source of income in the country? Is there oil in that area that was annexed? Was there a war over it?
Morocco doesn't have much oil. They do have minerals as some of their economic engine driver. And then also tourism is the third largest industry within the country. Then to the Sahara question, there was a lot of belief that Algeria had fostered some of the, I guess you'd call it, insurrection down in the Sahara. And so that's built up the tension between Morocco and Algeria because, the Moroccans will, they believe that the problems down in that area are caused by the Algerians. Sir? In a way, it's a buffer zone, yes. And but there's always just kind of been that level of conflict between the Moroccans and Algerians, and there have been numerous efforts to try and make peace in that region. We even sent James Baker to help try and resolve some of the difficulties with that region. And just to let you know, in Morocco, they call it the Moroccan Sahara. They don't. So yeah, they take that personally. You call it the Moroccan Sahara over there, but as I teach in my classes, it's we call it the Western Sahara and things like that. Tom, oh, sure.
What is the exchange rate? And then do they want the American dollar? I mean, you go to a lot of countries, they want the American dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Opposed to, they want you to use that. And then the other one is, did you have a lot of people come up and want to speak English with you, or did they expect you to converse with them in whatever little bit of Moroccan that you would have known?
Yeah, to the first question, the exchange rate was probably about 7.5 dirhams per US dollar was the exchange rate, and the bigger businesses that we went to would take US dollars. They were okay with that, and if you wanted to tip in US coins, a lot of times they were okay with it. because there was a lot more places to exchange the money at. Then in another kind of funny note, when you mentioned the question about the language, I had practiced some Arabic on the flight over, and I was eager to try it out. But most of those folks, when they saw that I was, kind of European descent, they wanted to speak French to me, and I do not know a lick of French. And so communication was very difficult because, they would I wanted to show off to them that I was trying to make an effort to reach out and being able to communicate with them, and they wanted to make that effort to, be able to speak to me. So it took us a while to get started on the conversation. Usually I would say something and then they would say bonjour. And so it took us a while to get started. Did anybody else have anything? Or, oh, yes ma'am.
What is it safe for women to travel without men in the country?
In my opinion, I would say women should travel. I would be opposed to it, traveling by yourself. Perhaps if you were with some other women, then I would probably imagine you would be okay. But particularly Western women might face a difficulty if they're by themselves through in forms of harassment and things like that. Yes, sir.
My initial thought when you were talking about the camel drive, totally in support of your decision. When I walked up to the camel, slapped aside, there was enough sand and dust coming off him. No, I'll take the other route.
Yeah. Well, what it was they had scared me about, apparently camels are very stubborn. They're worse than faculty. And so, but they were very stubborn. They were very stubborn animals. And so it was from what they were explaining how to navigate one, just seemed like something that was a little too complicated for me at that point in the trip. And so I decided to avoid that.
You were there about 2 weeks?
Yes, sir.
Besides that, they smell a lot.
Yes. And it was nothing uncommon to see a camel wandering, just meandering about by itself or with another camel just out in the desert by itself, and that was no big deal. They just figured, well, they'll eventually make their way home. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Was there any swimming or anything?
Yes, ma'am. We stayed at hotels that were designed for Westerners, so there were people swimming, and typically the men would have on swimming trunks, and the women would have on. Most of the time, you would see a woman in like I guess you'd call like a one-piece suit, but the hotels we stayed at were primarily for Westerners, and they were typically, the swimming pool kind of had like a big wall around it, so where folks on the outside couldn't really see in.
No sand?
Oh, there was plenty of it. There was plenty of sand just about everywhere. And I'm sure there's still some in my luggage today right now. Anything else?
What about the females and the veils?
It varied. In the more urban areas, you might see women in Western style clothing, or they might have on their face. They would have on the headdress, but their face wouldn't be covered. But in the more rural areas, in more of the interior, you would see folks where they would have the full mask, the full cover over their face. So in the urban areas, it was a little bit more open.
The ruling isn't there, the law.
Oh, no, ma'am, there's not near as much social pressure or pressure from men to do that. A lot of women keep it because it's traditional, and that's kind of what they grew up with, so that's what they stick with. But the one thing I did notice, a lot of the younger folks were wearing more Western style clothing. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's a very small minority of the population, maybe 1%. Most of it is Islamic. Kind of interesting was there a significant Jewish population there? And that was one part of our trip where we actually went to, I believe, a synagogue in Fez. And so it was a neat little difference of the tour there going into that synagogue. But but both of those were very small amounts of the population. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that there was sand everywhere.
Yes, sir.
Do they have any agriculture?
It's very limited. The agriculture is. There are some areas. Probably the product that I saw the most were dates. I saw lots of dates all over the place, but the agriculture was very limited in that region. It was much more closer to the coastline, and then there were the occasional spots that fed off of a river in the interior of the country, but it just wasn't a large-scale operation. Yes, sir.
In other parts of the Middle East, the economy was you had your extremely rich, those part of the royal family, and then it just drops to the bottom. Is that the same, or do you have a middle class?
One thing, Dr. Comiskey, I think you talked about that, the opening up economic opportunities, and so it's like that. The kind of that disparity between the rich and the poor is still there, and the king is trying to address that, by trying to create a middle class and to build up ownership of things for individuals, because that was another issue, was trying to figure out who owns something, because the culture, a lot of times it's owned by the family as a whole, not an individual, or it's owned by the community. So, but there's still that large gap between the rich and the poor. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we need to check two more things. One is we'll see how stubborn faculty are. I'm sure Dedric would love to demonstrate the belly dancing. Maybe not. Well,
Tom, you better alert the censors.
I'll knock it out.